There's a particular kind of man who walks through life differently. Not better, not superior, just different. He doesn't fit easily into groups, doesn't follow trends without question, doesn't accept the script society hands him simply because everyone else does. He's not trying to be difficult, he's not trying to stand out. But something inside him, something he can't ignore, pulls him toward a path that most people don't understand. And because of this, he often walks alone. Not because he wants to, not because he's antisocial or arrogant, but because the journey he's on, the commitment he's made to his own truth, to his own growth, to his own soul, requires a kind of solitude that most people aren't willing to accept. This man isn't chosen by some external force that deems him special. He's chosen because he chose himself. He chose authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, growth over stagnation. And that choice, that singular, courageous choice, changes everything. Today we're going to explore why this path is solitary. Not to glorify loneliness, but to understand it. To recognize that if you're walking alone right now, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because something is finally right. Let me tell you about a man named Rafael. Rafael was 32 when he realized he couldn't pretend anymore. He had everything that was supposed to make him happy. A stable corporate job, a circle of friends he'd known since college, weekend routines, social status, the life everyone expected him to have. But inside he felt hollow, like he was playing a character in someone else's story. He'd sit in meetings discussing quarterly projections and think, is this really what I'm meant to do with my life? He'd go out with friends, laugh at the right moments, participate in the conversations, but feel completely disconnected, like he was watching himself from outside his own body. Something was calling him, not to a specific career or place, but to something deeper, a way of living that was more authentic, more conscious, more aligned with who he actually was beneath all the roles he'd been playing. He started questioning everything, not in a cynical way, but in a genuine seeking way. Why am I doing this job? Because I want to, or because it's what's expected? Why am I friends with these people? Because we truly connect, or because it's convenient? Why am I living this way? Because it fulfills me, or because it's the path of least resistance? The more he questioned, the more he realized he'd been living on autopilot, following a script written by others, playing it safe, staying comfortable, and the cost of that comfort was his soul. So Rafael made a decision. He quit his job, not recklessly. He had savings, a plan, but definitively. He told his friends he was taking time to figure out what he actually wanted, to explore, to grow, to find his own path. Their reactions ranged from confusion to concern to judgment. You're throwing away a great career. You're being irresponsible. This is just a phase. You'll regret this. What are you running from? No one asked the question he actually needed someone to ask. What are you running toward? The invitation stopped. The group chats went quiet when he'd contribute something deeper than surface-level banter. His friends didn't understand why he'd want to spend a Friday night reading philosophy instead of at a bar. He wasn't judging them. He genuinely wasn't. He understood why they lived the way they did. It was safe, predictable, acceptable. But he couldn't do it anymore. The gap between who he was becoming and who they expected him to be was too wide. And so, slowly but inevitably, he found himself walking alone. Not dramatically, not with some grand declaration of independence, but quietly, naturally, the way a river finds its own course. Rafael learned something that every man on this path eventually learns. Growth is inherently isolating. When you commit to evolution, to questioning, to expanding, to becoming more conscious, you outgrow people. Not because you're better, but because you're different. You're no longer interested in the same conversations, no longer satisfied with the same pleasures, no longer content with the same level of consciousness. And most people don't want to go where you're going. They're comfortable where they are. And that's okay, but it means you walk alone. Let's be clear about what chosen actually means. Because this isn't about being special or superior. That's ego. That's the trap. A chosen man isn't chosen by God or destiny or some cosmic force that singles him out as more important than others. A chosen man is someone who has chosen to answer the call to live authentically, to pursue his personal legend, to honour his soul over his ego. Everyone hears this call, But most people ignore it. They silence it with distraction, with busyness, with the noise of modern life. They trade it for security, for approval, for comfort. The chosen man is simply the one who said yes, and saying yes to your soul means saying no to a lot of what the world offers. Here's why this path is solitary. First, you operate at a different frequency. Consciousness is like a radio dial. Most people are tuned to a particular station, the station of comfort, entertainment, distraction, surface-level living. When you commit to growth, you start tuning to a different frequency. Deeper conversations, more meaningful pursuits, greater self-awareness. And when you're on a different frequency, you literally can't connect with people still tuned to the old station. It's not judgment, it's just incompatibility. Second, you threaten the comfortable narrative. When Rafael quit his job to pursue something more meaningful, his friends felt threatened. Not consciously maybe, but on some level, his choice challenged their choices. If he can walk away from the good life to seek something more authentic, what does that say about them staying? Are they settling? Are they too afraid to pursue their own truth? People don't like these questions, so instead of examining their own lives, they judge yours. Your growth becomes a mirror they don't want to look into, so they distance themselves from you. Third, you're willing to face what others avoid. The path of consciousness requires facing your shadow, your pain, your unhealed wounds, your uncomfortable truths. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this, building elaborate defense mechanisms, staying busy so they never have to sit with themselves. But you can't grow without facing yourself, without doing the inner work, without walking through the fire. And most people aren't willing to do that. They want the transformation without the difficulty, the growth without the discomfort. When they see you doing the work they're avoiding, it creates distance, because your commitment to truth highlights their avoidance of it. Fourth, you've stopped performing. Society is built on performance, on wearing masks, on presenting the version of yourself that's acceptable, impressive, successful. The chosen man stops performing. He becomes real, authentic, unfiltered in a way that makes people uncomfortable. Because when you stop performing, you stop participating in the collective illusion. And people who are still performing sense that. They feel exposed around you. So they retreat to people who will play the game with them. Fifth, your timeline is different. Most people are following a preset timeline: graduate, career, marriage, house, kids, retirement, death. When you're on your own path, you're not following that timeline. You're following your soul's timeline, which doesn't care about society's expectations. You might be starting over at 35, exploring at 40, still seeking at 50. And to people following the conventional path, this looks like failure. Like you're lost, but you're not lost. You're just on a different map. Rafael spent 2 years exploring, traveling, reading, meditating, working odd jobs, living simply, growing internally. To his old friends, it looked like he was wasting his life. To his family, it looked like a breakdown. But to Rafael, it was the most alive he'd ever felt. Because for the first time, he was living his own life. Not the life others expected, not the life society designed. His life. And yes, he was alone. But he wasn't lonely, because he discovered something profound. There's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from others when you desperately want connection. Solitude is the peace of being alone because you're connected to something deeper, to yourself, to your purpose, to your truth. Rafael had moved from loneliness to solitude. The first year was hard. He missed his friends, missed the sense of belonging, missed being part of something. But gradually, something shifted. He started finding companionship in books, in nature, in his own thoughts. He started enjoying his own company. He realized he'd spent years surrounded by people but feeling profoundly lonely, because none of those connections were real. They were all based on the performance, the mask, the acceptable version of himself. Now, walking alone, he felt less lonely than he ever had in a crowd. There's a particular kind of strength that comes from solitude, a strength that can't be forged in groups, in validation, in approval. When you have no one to lean on, you discover you can stand on your own. When you have no one to impress, you discover who you are beneath the performance. When you have no one to fill the silence, you discover what your own voice sounds like. This is the gift of walking alone. Not the loneliness, That's the price. But the self-discovery, the self-reliance, the unshakable sense of who you are. Rafael learned to do several things that every man on this path must learn. 1. He stopped explaining himself. He realized that people who aren't on this path can't understand it. No amount of explanation will make them see what you see. So he stopped trying to justify his choices, stopped defending his path, stopped needing others to validate his journey. 2. He found his tribe, small but real. Eventually, Rafael met others on similar paths. Not many, but a few. And those few connections were deeper, more real, more nourishing than hundreds of superficial friendships. The chosen man doesn't walk alone forever, but he walks alone until he finds people who can walk at his pace, on his frequency, toward the same horizon. Quality over quantity, depth over breadth. 3. He made peace with being misunderstood. Most people will never understand why you live the way you do, why you make the choices you make, why you value what you value, and that's okay. You're not living for their understanding, you're living for your soul's fulfillment. The moment Rafael stopped needing to be understood, he became free. 4. He honored the sacrifice. Walking this path costs something. It costs relationships, convenience, social status, the comfort of fitting in. Rafael didn't pretend it didn't hurt. He acknowledged the sacrifice, honored it. But he also recognized that what he gained was worth what he lost. He lost the crowd, but he found himself, and that trade was worth it. Here's the paradox that Rafael discovered. The more you walk alone, the less alone you actually are. Because when you stop seeking connection outside, you find connection inside. Connection to your own soul, to the universe, to something larger than yourself. The chosen man walks alone physically, but he's accompanied spiritually, by his purpose, by his truth, by the quiet knowing that he's exactly where he's meant to be. And here's the other paradox. Walking alone is what makes you capable of true connection. When you're dependent on others for your sense of self, your relationships are transactional, needy, based on what you can get from them. But when you've done the work of walking alone, when you've become whole within yourself, you can finally connect with others from a place of wholeness, not neediness. Rafael eventually found a partner, but not in the desperate, searching way he would have before. He found her because he was complete on his own and she was complete on her own, and they chose to walk together not out of need, but out of genuine resonance. The relationship was different than any he'd had before, deeper, more honest, more free, because he'd learned to walk alone first. This is what people don't understand about the chosen man. He doesn't walk alone because he's incapable of connection. He walks alone because he refuses to compromise his truth for connection. He's willing to be alone rather than be in relationships that require him to be someone he's not. He's willing to be misunderstood rather than pretend to be understood. He's willing to sacrifice popularity for authenticity. This isn't easy. It's not supposed to be. The path of consciousness never is. But it's worth it, because the alternative, living a lie, wearing a mask, betraying your soul, is a slower, more painful death. If you're watching this, you probably know exactly what Rafael felt. You've experienced the isolation that comes with growth, the loneliness of seeing things others don't see, the pain of outgrowing people you love. And maybe you've wondered, am I doing something wrong? Should I just go back to how things were, fit in, stop being so different? No, you can't go back. Not really. Once you've tasted authenticity, you can't return to performance. Once you've experienced truth, you can't return to illusion. The door behind you is closed, and that's not a tragedy. That's liberation. Yes, you walk alone right now. But understand this, you're not alone in walking alone. All over the world, there are men and women on this same path, walking their own version of the journey you're on, facing their own version of the loneliness you feel. You may not see them, you may not meet them yet, but they exist. And when you do meet them, when you finally encounter someone on your frequency, at your level of consciousness moving toward the same horizon, the connection will be unlike anything you experienced before, worth every moment of solitude that preceded it. Until then, walk your path with dignity, with courage, with the quiet knowing that you're honouring something sacred, your own soul. Don't apologise for your journey. Don't diminish yourself to make others comfortable. Don't betray your truth to avoid being alone. Walk alone if you must. Walk proudly. Walk consciously. Because you're not walking alone. You're walking ahead. Rafael is 37 now, 5 years since he left his old life. He has a small circle of deep friendships, a partner who sees him, work that matters to him. But he still spends a lot of time alone, by choice now, not by circumstance, because he learned that solitude isn't something to escape, it's something to honour. It's where he connects with himself, where he hears his soul's voice, where he remembers who he is. The chosen man doesn't walk alone forever, but he never stops valuing solitude, because it's in solitude that he remains chosen, not by others but by himself. You're not broken for walking alone, you're not strange, you're not doing it wrong, you're doing exactly what your soul called you to do. Walk on. The path is narrow, the company is scarce, but the destination, becoming who you truly are, is worth every solitary step.